Hello and welcome everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are tuning in from. We are so excited to welcome you to the Your Journey Getting Started panel and Q&A. My name is Jessica Chung. I'm an admissions officer at the Stanford Graduate School of Business, and I'm really excited to kick off this panel and introduce you to our community and to our wonderful panelists today. So just to give you a bit of an overview of today's event, we're going to start with a brief introduction to our global community. We're going to have you meet our panelists. We'll start with a little bit of predetermined Q&A just to get the panel warmed up, and then we'll turn it over to your questions. And that's where we're going to spend most of our time today. We are going to spend about 55 minutes together. And we're so excited that so many of you are spending a part of your day with us. We've got a big crowd in the room, which is really, really exciting. It might mean that we won't get to all of your questions today, but I do encourage you to create an account on mystanford.mba or visit our website where you can look at our many, many summer offerings to find events that address your additional interests. I encourage you to take a look and find the events that address all of your questions, whatever we don't answer today. And you can, of course, always contact our office with your questions. My colleagues will drop our contact information in the chat. We are 100% in your corner, and we are here to answer all of your questions as you navigate this process. So I want to start by introducing you all to our incredible community. Spoiler alert, every time I ask students what their favorite part of the GSB is, I'd say 99% of the time say that the best part of the GSB is the people. And the people at the GSB come from all over the country and all over the world. They represent so many different backgrounds and so many different interests. There's truly no single path to the GSB. And on this slide, you can see a little bit about the many different perspectives that are a part of our community. This is sort of our community by the numbers, but of course our community is so much more than these numbers can really tell you. And so to that end, we have an incredible panel of students and alumni here with us today. I'm going to let them introduce themselves, but as you can see on the slide, there's a little bit of information about where they are coming from or where they have gone after the GSB. So perhaps we'll start with, let me see. And is Andrew online yet? Hi, Andrew. Do you want to start by introducing yourself, perhaps including your class year, where you came to the GSB from, and where you are now?
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to get us started. So Andrew Jakubowski, a member of the class of 2020. Came to the GSB from Mexico City by way of Brooklyn, New York, and originally from Philadelphia, and currently zooming in from Mexico City. So very glad to be here today and looking forward to the conversation.
Awesome. Thank you for being here, Andrew. Next up is Isabel.
Hi, everyone. I'm Isabel from Quito, Ecuador. Before the GSB, I was in Ecuador working in K-12 education. And now I'm a second-year MBA, thinking of working in workforce development. And I just wanted to say that I will be smiling like stupid because it's such an honor to be with these folks in a panel.
Awesome. Thank you. I feel honored to be on a panel with you too. Jenny, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, happy to. My name is Jenny Jo, and I am graduating along with Isa this June, and we're both pursuing, in addition to the GSB, a master's in education. Before the GSB, I was working at Bain in Los Angeles, and then after school, I will be returning to Bain, but this time in the Boston office.
Thank you so much for being here. And finally, Sam, you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Sam. So good to see you, Jenny, Isabel, and Andrew. And you're right about the GSB being great for the people, and it's just so fun to see everyone on this panel already. I'm Sam. I went to Dartmouth. and I was working also in K-12 education, but in the US for the San Francisco School District. Right before the GSB, I was a restorative justice and leadership coach. And I'm from Massachusetts. I'm actually home right now. I'm living in New York City though. And I'm a diversity and inclusion consultant and trainer right now.
I want to echo Isabel's excitement. So as one of the planners of this event, I brought together this panel because these four have done some really incredible things. They've, I think, really changed GSB's community, and that's kind of what we see our students doing. Not only does the GSB transform our students and provide a transformative educational experience, our students in turn also transform our community. And I think these four incredible leaders have really done just that. So I'll begin with a few questions and then we'll turn it over to audience Q&A. So I'm first curious about why an MBA and why a Stanford MBA? What was it that drove you to pursue an MBA, and what was it about Stanford that drew you to campus? Whoever wants to start.
I can go. Get us, break the ice. Because I only applied to Stanford. I only applied to one business school. I only wanted to go to Stanford because of the focus on leadership development and the qualitative side of running a business or running an organization, and the importance of people. At my job at the San Francisco School District, I was looking up at the leadership and being like, there's a lot to work on here. I want to work on these things, and kind of, I saw some gaps in, not as many hard skill gaps, more soft skill gaps, and some hard skill gaps, being honest, around scaling a really big program, around really disrupting a really entrenched system, but also about really about leadership. And I love that the GSB focused on that. And I felt like they really had their priorities right and like what their area of focus was. I also was trying to career pivot, not huge career pivot, but away from directly in education and more towards just doing diversity and inclusion for anyone. And then the biggest thing was talking to people at the school and hearing about the people, and also just like the really strong community spirit of the GSB. The living on campus piece, I think, makes a really big difference around that. And it's just, we're all just doing everything together. And I loved that about Dartmouth. And I have lifelong friends from that. And now I feel like I have like 800 lifelong friends at the GSB. You really do get to know everyone, which I think is really, really special and pretty unique.
I'm happy to answer, and I'll sort of take the two questions in turn. First, why an MBA, and then second, what led me to Stanford specifically. And I had known for a while that I really wanted to go back to graduate school. And for me, there were two factors that helped me land on an MBA. First, I just wanted what I now frame as an enriching experience. So personally enriching, intellectually enriching, professionally enriching. And I think you can get that through a lot of graduate programs. The second piece, though, is I wanted something that would really create possibility, opportunity, and not limit in any way what the future could look like. And I think that is where an MBA is so powerful, in that it lets you gain exposure, test and learn, but it also is kind of infinitely open in terms of what you do during and after. So I ultimately landed on pursuing the MBA, and Stanford was top of my list as well, for three reasons, beyond the people, which I think people often highlight. Just first, in terms of the curriculum, there's a level of openness in terms of your MBA courses, but also the ability to access classes, how we say, across the street or in other schools at the university. And then within the MBA program, just academically, in terms of research, there's a lot happening on organizational behavior, culture, diversity, equity, inclusion. And these are just intellectual and academic areas that really excite me. The second thing was, Stanford's proximity to the startup world and to the social innovation world. And again, two areas that I have tangential exposure to in my pre-GSB life, but as a result feel a lot richer and more informed as a result of opting to go to Stanford for the MBA. And then finally, the culture, I think really did pop to me when I was kind of weighing different options. And in one way, because of the curriculum, because of the proximity to what I identified, there's a slightly less stereotypical business school type culture, which was really important for me. And you have that good old California sunshine, that vitamin D boosting everyone's energy and positivity. So that was just a lot of my thinking and kind of the path from what kind of school to which school and where I am today.
I resonate with things both Sam and Andrew have shared. I actually never even considered an MBA. I did not take the GMAT. At the time I was teaching at a really radical public school in Ecuador, and the only reason why Stanford entered into my options was because I had a mentor who had just started an NGO in the region, who had graduated from the GSB. We challenged all of these stereotypes about what a business school student looks like and what you can do with a business school degree. So he was living a very scrappy life, just bringing students from all across the continent together. And I found that really inspiring. So I decided not to apply to Harvard Divinity School, which was my choice, my top choice, and instead to look at a degree that, like Andrew said, has the opportunity to open many different paths and to also offer more security than I felt like I had with an undergrad in philosophy. So I'm very grateful that that mentor crossed my path.
Wow, we're so glad you decided to apply too. That's awesome.
I feel like the hardest part about going last is that I'm definitely not going to offer anything super novel, but I come from a more traditional background. I'm not sure how many of you on the webinar come from finance and consulting. And so in many ways, I think the path that I was on from a hard skills perspective, I didn't necessarily need to come to business school, and definitely weighed the trade-offs between, being able to make money and have a stable income for 2 years versus potentially going into debt. And I just want to kind of echo that when I visited, I forget, it was probably in the fall, I visited a class where I witnessed a Stanford student essentially do a role play in a way that I never thought that was kind of possible or was happening in business school. I won't sort of go through the specifics, but essentially it was just really highlighting that what a leader looks like can and does look like me, and that there was a way for my personality and my values to be shown through my leadership. And I think for me, drove home the point that actually the next 2 years can be an investment in terms of how to think about how I want to be a leader and actually gain a lot more reps and experience. Both in the classroom and I would say outside the classroom as well. I think one of the beautiful things about business school and MBA in particular is that every coffee chat or lunch or social event you go to is an opportunity to meet people who are different from you, and then also learn where your strengths are, where your areas of opportunity might be. And it's been like a continuous, I think, growing experience for me as well to learn a little bit more about myself and also how I can contribute to the broader world. So
Awesome. Thank you, everyone, for those really, really genuine responses. I remember another student that I had talked to describe the GSB experience as unlocking creative futures, that it really expanded sort of the possibilities of what she could be. And I loved that. And I feel like all of your answers reinforce the possibilities and the potential of the business school experience. I'm going to ask one more question, and then I'm going to turn to our Q&A box. So for our attendees, please keep submitting your questions or upvoting other attendees' questions. I already see that there are so many really thoughtful questions there. So please keep submitting your questions or upvoting the questions that you want to see us answer. So my last prepared question is, what was the best application advice that you got? Our attendees are starting their journey as an applicant. That's the theme of this panel. So what was one of the best pieces of advice that you got about the application process? Or what advice do you wish you had gotten?
I can kick us off on this one. So my advice has to do with the What Matters essay, which hopefully is still the essay, and I'm not dating myself. I think it is really intimidating for that to be, an admissions question in some ways, because it doesn't feel like the answer itself, should be super personal or should be really authentic to you. And I, have gone through the back and forth process of like, I think this is what my answer should be. This is what people are telling me the answer is. And so I think my best advice in particular to the Stanford application is that the admissions office really does want to know what matters most to you and why. And the iterations of that essay that I wrote that were me trying to be someone that I thought they wanted to admit were never the best versions. And I think one of the alums that I talked to told me, if you don't feel a little bit vulnerable when you press submit, then you probably haven't done it fully. So I would just encourage all of you to really take some time to introspect and think about the question, and don't be scared by the fact that, it just happens to sit on an admissions application, because at the end of the day, I think no matter what happens, it's a very worthwhile and fulfilling exercise, and honestly captures a lot of why Stanford is just such a special and unique place, because they really do want to get to know you.
I'm going to piggyback on this. I couldn't agree more, Jenny. That is like the number one thing I highlight when I talk to friends who want to apply to Stanford is after meeting the people at Stanford, I'm like, I think that is, I have no evidence of this other than just who the students are at Stanford. But I personally think that is the key to getting into Stanford is they're getting a lot of people who are highly qualified in a lot of different ways. And it's really like who you are as a person and how you're able to convey that through that essay that I think sets people apart. And like the more vulnerable, the more deep, the more authentic, raw, and real you can get in that essay, the better. And one of the things that I really recommend is having a lot of different people look it over, but people who offer different things. So like have a friend who went to business school look at it, have a friend who's really good at creative writing look at it, have a friend who knows you really well look at it, and give you feedback from different perspectives, and make sure that it's, really well crafted and saying what you really truly what you want to say, and is authentically you. I had my parents look at it, people who really, really get me, and can like hold me to the authenticity bar of like, is that really what what you want, or what, and that forget the shoulds, what I should be, like Jenny said, like just be as much as of who you are as possible. Yeah, I really think that it's like spending a good chunk of time on that is really, really important.
Well, I think both Jenny and Sam really spoke to the what of the application, and I couldn't agree more, right? It's about just being your authentic self and trusting yourself, and having that vulnerability and willing to write what you truly want to write. I think just the one add that I would make is it's also about doing the how authentically. And so, to Sam's suggestion of testing with a lot of people or getting a lot of input, if that's your best path forward for you as an individual in this journey, lean into it, right? And take advantage of the people around you. If that's not something that necessarily resonates, then trust that instinct as well, right? And I think, just to provide a bit of foil, I had a very narrow engagement with my application. And so really, I think if I've learned anything along the way from peers and folks that I've engaged with, there's a million ways to get to the same outcome, and it's doing the path or the how that really resonates and is authentic to you the same way that the what, we hope is representative of you in the application.
I didn't have much wisdom advice coming in, but I think that one of the ways in which I won was that I didn't know at all about all these websites and forums where you can see when people got calls and stuff like that. And one dinner I heard about all of this and I was like, wow, Like, I had no idea. I missed the call saying I got into a GSP because I didn't even know I was going to get a call. So like just taking distance from all of the wealth of advice and people making money off of students that are interested in joining business school. I can't speak for everyone, but I think that it really helped me to not be constantly tied to those systems. And then the second part is that I know it's like easy for me to say from this place, but your self-worth is not tied to where you go to school.
Thank you all so much for those insights. So I'm going to turn to our Q&A box now, and I see we've got a lot of questions coming in. So I'm going to suggest that for each question, have a couple of you chime in, and then if anybody else has something really, really pressing they want to add, feel free to chime in as well. But I'm hoping we can get through as many questions as we can during this time. So one question from Shivam that I really, really like asks, what is one common misconception of the GSB? Or perhaps put another way, which I think another student had asked, what was something that surprised you or that was unexpected about your GSB experience?
Well, this feels relevant given the crew. I definitely came in thinking that I had my deep lessons on what justice and ethical leadership looks like outside of the GSB, and that I was just going to come in holding tight to my values and not letting anyone move me. And literally every single person on this call has helped me learn how to be a more ethical leader and how to think more complexly about issues of social justice. So like, I think there can be a narrow conception of who goes to business school and what drives them. And I think there's a diversity of people with many different drives here.
Thank you for sharing that. That's really beautiful.
I'm happy to jump in. I guess I would say, I think people sometimes think that business school is not hard academically. And while, there is kind of a buffer with the grades not really mattering, and I wouldn't say that it's necessarily the academics that make it hard, the combination of all the different things that are happening at business school can be can be a lot. And I think it takes a bit of time to figure out how to manage everything, even for people who are very used to managing a lot of different things. And so I think fall quarter can be quite overwhelming, just the pure number of classes, especially if you're someone who is not familiar with, the business concepts. I was coming from education, meeting so many people, all of whom are so fascinating, all the different extracurricular stuff, all the different social events. It can be very, it's amazing. And like, once you kind of figure out what matters to you and why, but once you figure out like what works for you, you can just get into flow really. But I do think it takes people some time to manage everything, because if you try and do everything 100%, you just can't. So I think coming in with like some understanding of like, it isn't all fun and games. Like there is like a lot to do and a lot to absorb. And it can be hard at times. Like I think a lot of my friends would say like business school is like one of the best experiences of their life, but it was also one of the hardest in a lot of ways. And not just like, I wouldn't say purely academically, but just like, and kind of figuring out who you are, what you want to prioritize, who you want to spend your time with. It's a new thing to go to school as an adult. And I think just like figuring that out is definitely a journey. And I almost feel like the GSB does it on purpose because it's part of the learning. But yeah, that's one of the things I would say.
Awesome. Thank you for that insight. I have a follow-up question. I mean, I think graduate school, business school, it's a transition for anyone, whether that's whether that's a transition in terms of pace of life, a transition academically, geographically, culturally. I think everybody experiences some kind of transition. What were some of the best resources or support systems that supported you all in that transition?
Well, I think, reflecting on my experience, it's definitely the community and really just, a subset of individuals who went above and beyond to, I think, demonstrate openness, empathy, unwavering support. And I actually think this person might even be joining this webinar right now, but it's really the people who help with that transition. And I think, Jessica, you highlighted, 4 or 5 of countless ways in which the experience can be so different from what you were living previously, that those transitions mixed with everything Sam highlighted can create a really acutely new and challenging path. And to Sam's point, it certainly forces introspection, learning, growth, development. It's really hard to do that on your own. And so again, I really think it's people in the class, people in the staff, professors, to the extent you connect with them, resources outside the GSB, but on Stanford's campus, right? And it's kind of to like so much we spoke about, what resonates or meets your underlying needs, what are your challenges, and how might the community be able to show up to support there?
Yeah, and I would add to what Andrew said, there are so many, it's kind of a double-edged sword, I guess. There are so many clubs and communities you could be a part of, and they'll put obviously a commitment onto your calendar, but it's those same communities and groups that on days where you're faced with, the plethora of challenges that might arise throughout your day, that those are the people that you call, you text, you meet up with. And I think after I was able to kind of identify the communities and groups that I wanted to invest in, some of which are related to social justice and impact investing and things that I cared about probably more on a professional level, but also things like my WIM group, my Women in Management group that Isa is actually in, and even doing things like the GSB show. Like, I grew up dancing, and dancing has been one consistent thing that I've continued to do and take a lot of peace and joy in, to keep investing in them, because I do think like that's how this experience really kind of shines in the end, is that you have invested this time and energy with people and they reinvest it right back at you. And then the only other thing I'll say is don't forget about the people outside this community who also want to and can pour into you. I feel like my first quarter, my family barely heard from me. And, when they did, it was like, are you alive? And I, would take days to respond because I was like inundated with all of the excitement of the GSB. But especially as I'm looking to graduation in a couple weeks, like I really, really am pulling in, my friends from every walk of life. And sometimes wish I did that sooner in the experience, because they can serve as really important reminders of giving you perspective about this experience, and then also reminding you of who you were before you came and who you will be and continue to be when you leave.
Thank you both for those responses. So we have a couple questions about goals, and I'm going to try to combine them a little bit. So Hayden and Adrian are wondering about what were your goals when you were applying to the GSB, and if I can add, how has the GSB changed your goals and transformed your goals in big ways and in small ways? I will also start by saying that we admit students with sort of all levels of clarity regarding their goals, whether they have a very, very exact and precise goal that they want to achieve by the end of business school or through their business school experience, or if they have a more loose undefined goal that they're interested in. So we admit students with all across the spectrum in terms of clarity around their goals. But our attendees are curious about what some of your goals were coming in and how the GSB has impacted your goals, whether it's made them more defined, whether it's shifted them. What were some of your goals and how has the GSB affected them?
At the start of the school year, Kristen Moss, admissions director, does a speech where she calls on a couple of folks, actually like dozens of people. And she called on me being like, and we have a teacher from Ecuador who's gonna revolutionize education in Latin America or something like that. And I will not revolutionize education in Latin America. I think that's a goal that I still hold in some parts of my heart, but I don't see myself in Ecuador in the near future. And it's been one professor, I took a class with Jenny from the dual degree program, Rob Erstein, who's really pushed me to think about alternatives to higher education in the US and how our community college system is not working very well and our apprenticeship programs are not there yet. And now that's an area that I've been really excited about and trying to learn as much as I can about how to connect people to opportunities. And it was all very much tied to COVID-19 and living COVID-19 at the GSD and seeing mass furloughs all around and trying to find how I can use my skills to connect people to dignified work. So goals have changed a lot. Values have kind of stayed the same, but we'll see how they continue to change in the coming months.
I think Issa's point or suggestion that goals change but values stay the same is a bit of what my experience was. So when I applied, I somewhat naively was thinking, these are the industries that are attractive to me. These are the functions that are attractive to me. Let me put two and two together and that's going to be my path forward. And, I think my GSB experience, a combination of the academic coursework and the extracurricular activities, and I think just living through everything we've kind of been talking about today, forced, if not encouraged me to be a little bit more creative on how I'm thinking about, goals moving forward. And so what initially was that framework around industries or functions became something more values-based, or I call them my pillars, in thinking about what opportunities may look like moving forward and what motivates me and what I would hope to get out of a given opportunity. And so, I think very fortunately, aspects of the program are intentionally designed to help people broaden their way of thinking about goals, and simultaneously define goals that, again, are authentic to how they think and what they aspire to achieve and what they aspire to impact in the communities around them. And so I think it's just this changed mental model in a way. Many of the same ingredients, but now kind of recognizing that the dish could take a lot of shapes and taste delicious in the end.
Jessica, can I add one thing? It's not what my goals were, but a friend who graduated from the GSB wrote a blog post, who's actually in the MSX program. And I thought one of the really cool things that he said that I think is so true is that while a lot of people at the GSB have a lot of goals for themselves, when you go to events, people are often giving more than they're taking at those events, and like offering advice, offering connections, offering help more than they're even trying to meet their own goals. And I think that that's something really special about the GSB. It doesn't feel like it's just a bunch of people there to try and achieve their goals, even though people have a lot of goals. It's like people are there to achieve their goals, but also help other people achieve their goals. And that's, I think, a really unique and beautiful thing about the GSB.
Thank you all so much for those insights. I actually had a related question that Anna posted for Sam about pivoting. So Anna asks or says that they would love to learn more about how the GSB helped you pivot. Were there any specific courses or campus activities that you found particularly helpful?
So the first thing that I would say about this is I think it's hard to underestimate how much just being within a culture that has a language and learning that language matters. Like, I now understand what people are talking about. Like when I went to business school, my friends who worked in the business, like in the private sector, were like, you need to stop saying you want to work in business. Like, that doesn't mean anything. And now I feel like I have a much better just vocabulary and language and understanding that I can go into a conversation and like understand what's happening and also add value. Like, people like look to me now at having an MBA and add value in certain ways. So I think that's actually just huge, which is just being like inundated with conversation. And then honestly, I think I learned as much about the business world in my out of class conversations and experiences as I did in class. The second part of that was like, what classes or what, so I think what I would also say is to push yourself, like to take classes that are not necessarily easy for you and that are not playing to your strengths as much as, but have a different goal there, right? Like, my goals in my super quantitative classes were just like, I just need to understand this at a basic level. I don't need to master it. And I'm not going to be going on to like work in finance, right? I just want to be able to understand what people are talking about and contribute, or even know like when I need help. And then really dig in on the things that I'm passionate about and that I'm good at. And also, and I really feel like this is so important, understand that you, as someone who is coming from a unique background, have so much to add to the GSB community. And like, I would talk about teaching a lot in my first year classes, and people would come up to me and be like, wow, that was so interesting to learn about how being a teacher is like being a leader, and how that it was very similar. Like, and I just think often people are like, oh, I feel like I'm an outsider, like an imposter syndrome, but it's like, no, like, you are an attribute to like, you're useful for other people to have that outside perspective, and to make sure that you frame it in that way is really, really important. I can't really stress that enough.
I love that. Thank you so much for that. The next question goes to Jenny and Isabel. We had a couple of students asking, or a couple of prospective students asking about your experiences pursuing a joint degree. So if you could share a little bit about what it's been like taking classes in the two different schools, anything else about balancing those two degrees. I think our attendees would really appreciate it.
I think the Master's in Education has created an avenue for me to form friendships with folks from different programs, which has been so valuable from lots of education students, especially the year before COVID. This year, the class is really small, but next year will be big again. I've taken a lot of D-School classes where you get like folks from engineering and medicine. I think that's been the most valuable part. And then the second part is I still do love some philosophy, and I think the education school gives me really helpful theories and frameworks to which to understand social processes. And then the business school and the design school have like lots of applied learning classes where you can quickly learn like the skills, which I could have easily ended up in just a Master's in Education program, and I would have so missed out on all of the like applied learning that the business school really excels at.
Yeah, I definitely echo a lot of Isabel's sentiments, because I actually think that doing both at the same time has bolstered my experience. because I never really thought that like my MBA experience in and of itself was just going to be sort of applied to any sort of business. I was always sort of more impact oriented, but I didn't have a ton of exposure to the education world professionally before coming to the GSB. So I would say two things. One is that, to Issa's point, like the community, both sort of in the ed school, but I would actually say the joint degree students has been such a really nice group of friends that we formed over time. And I think moments where I felt a little bit like, what about when we don't maximize profit, or what are the other values that matter in this certain case? I can always look to my peers in the joint degree program and know that I have a home of people who are also sitting in class nodding along with me. And so a lot of those cross-listed classes have been really, really helpful. Isa mentioned the disruptions in education with Professor Erstein was really formative for me. And then I think the second piece is, in some ways, being a part of the ed school has given me, just a break from the GSB sometimes, honestly. Like sometimes it's just nice to be able to bounce back and forth and, meet people who have very, very different aspirations and career trajectories than we will. And it also serves as a reminder that successful and fulfilling careers look very different for very different people. And it's just nice to come into contact and become friends with these people, especially, when you have 2 years of being immersed in one and sometimes also get an outlet in the other. So I feel very lucky to have done the joint degree.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing those perspectives. The next question comes from Nicole. I love this question. Nicole asks, who is the most inspiring person you've met at Stanford and why? Seems like a really hard question too, but I'm very curious about the answer myself.
I'm gonna make Andrew blush, but Andrew organized the most beautiful display of allyship I've seen. It was this rally in support of Black classmates and peers and professors and members of our community at the height of exactly 1 year ago, the height of the Black Lives Matter movement. And there was poetry and there was singing, and he reached out to the dean to make sure that we could have an in-person gathering at a time when it wasn't allowed. And it was safe and it was really inspiring. So shout out to Andrew.
That was beautiful. Thank you for that. I know it must be a very difficult question to answer. We can always come back to it. But Isabel, thank you so much for sharing that. I think that that's really, really beautiful. And one thing we used to say in our presentations is that the world needs principled leaders now more than ever. And I think that that's something that is a big part of the Stanford GSB ethos and culture. So I think it's really good to hear that reinforced through the actual experiences that you all have had on campus and in our community. So thank you so much for sharing that. We can always come back to this question.
I have one that comes to mind. Maybe not what you were envisioning, but the GSB Residences housing team is absolutely incredible. And especially as we transition into a totally virtual experience, watching Arthel and his team just essentially make things happen overnight for us and keep us safe and to keep us healthy and protected and just go above and beyond. He wins the Distinguished Service Award, I feel like every 5 seconds, so probably knows this already, but just like the support team behind how the GSB operates has been so inspiring. And sometimes I just like look around and I'm like, the reason this looks the way it does and I can just go about my day without having to worry about food or housing or whatever is happening in the world is because there is like an army of people behind the scenes who work so hard for us. So I wanted to give them a shout out.
Awesome. Thank you for that. So the next question comes from Zach, who asks, could you talk about your global experiences and how you've applied those learnings in your MBA experience? So for those of you in the audience who don't know, we have a global experience requirement as part of the MBA education because we want our students to learn more about how business happens around the world and to expand their global business perspective. Maybe I'll throw this question to Sam and Andrew, just because I know things have been probably a little bit different during the past year and some change. So Sam, Andrew, any insights on the global experience that you'd be able to share?
Yeah, I can go ahead and I'll keep it brief, but I'd say a few things. One is a piece of advice, and one is, so I did 2 global experiences. I did a GMX, which is where you do an internship in another country. And I did a GST, which is the what most people do during their MBA, where they do like a study trip that's run by the second year students in another country. My GMX, so my internship at my GMX, I liked even more than I liked my regular internship. And doing it, I was in Paris working at a tech company, creating their L&D, their entire learning and development curriculum. And I just had, given that I was only there for a month, I talk about this experience a disproportionate amount of time. Like people probably think I lived in Paris for a year and like speak French, which I don't. But I just had the best time, both like professionally and integrating into a whole nother culture and learning about how they work. And honestly, I really vibed with it. Like they really, I think, have a good work-life balance. But also like really had a great business model, the tech company that I was working at. And it was the GSB founder, and actually just seeing the GSB leadership. And he really was such an epitome of a great GSB leader embodied in practice was so cool. So I really just highly recommend the GMX experience. And I just think it was such a unique opportunity. Like, when am I going to get to work in France? It's like actually really hard to get all the papers together to do something like that. So this was a really amazing opportunity for me. And what I would recommend with my piece of advice is, I think that I focused too much on the country. Like I ended up in Thailand on my GST, and I wish I'd focused more on the topic of the GST and made sure that I was passionate about the topic, because there's different topics for the different GSTs. And I definitely was like, oh, I want to go to Thailand. So that was my decision-making process. And I really do wish that I had focused more, not that it was great, it was really fun, but I would say academically, I could have had a more enriching experience and a more unique experience, I think, than just focusing on the country. So that's a really, if you end up going to GSB, a real piece of advice I have. And I really wish I had been able to do one of the global studies programs before school started. People really loved those and came in with a very strong group of friends. I had a wedding, so I couldn't do it, but it was something that I really feel like I wish I had been able to do. So if you have the opportunity to do that, in addition to all the unofficial events, I think people very much love those programs.
Yeah, I think just reflecting on my experience, so I grew up in a very US Americana type setting in the Philadelphia and suburbs. And I didn't leave the country until after I had graduated from undergrad. But I did live abroad before going to the GSB, and it just revolutionized so much about the way I thought, my values, how I define success, kind of all of these factors that just made having an international and multicultural experience really important for me. And that was also a contributing factor in kind of, business school and decisions made while at the GSB. I was just reflecting now and realized I did 4 global experiences, as well as an internship in Brazil. So in terms of kind of the opportunities and experiences afforded to me, I went to Asia for the first time, lived in Europe for the first time. I traveled to and lived in Brazil for the first time, and accumulated professional experiences in those settings, academic experiences in those settings, language, culture, and all of these other aspects of being present that I just wouldn't have necessarily had the opportunity to pursue if just one or two factors were different around, my experience or the opportunities within the GSB. And so for those who might be outside of the US, and those who are interested in going outside of the US, perhaps after their MBA, there's a lot of possibility and opportunity in what you can do to make that a reality. And, if that's what's important to you, like some of the other things we talked about, you can really lean into what's offered through the program. And I'm back abroad now, and I expect to stay abroad for a long time. And in every place I go, right, there's either a network or perhaps an opportunity or, at least some type of support that I think exists and stems from the GSB community.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So I know we only have a couple minutes left. I wish we could chat for much longer. You'll see that there's a poll up. Please let us know how we're doing. We're here to serve you. So please let us know what we can do better or what we're doing well. So I'll throw out two more questions. It's very difficult because our attendees have submitted some really, really amazing questions. So I'm going to throw out two questions, and you'll each have an opportunity to respond. And you can pick which question you want to respond to. So there have been a couple of questions about timing. A couple of students have kind of been wondering, like, how did you know that it was the right time to get an MBA, or did you not know? So a couple questions about timing. And then another question that I saw asked if you could share your favorite or most meaningful class or experience that you've had. So those are the two questions. You can pick which one you'd like to respond to, and everybody can chime in.
I'll just quickly say on timing, trust your gut. There's no too early, there's no too late. Do it when it feels right. And then if I can just speak to, I think, two experiences that I will carry with me, I think for the rest of my life, we're both speaking kind of larger scale disclosure experiences, and one was a low keynote talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and my experience and my identities. And then the second was my talk, which for those who aren't familiar is just kind of a tradition within the GSB community on a weekly basis where two individuals really have free white space to share anything and everything they'd like. And I just, the emotional, personal, communal aspects of both of those experiences will stay with me, I think, forever.
Adding to the timing question, the one mentor that convinced me to apply to Stanford, he told me I was way too early and that I should wait a couple of years before going to business school. I started at 23. One of my closest friends here is 34. So like you have the full range of like 10 years of difference in professional experiences. I think it does shape how, like sometimes the things that I'm learning in class, I haven't seen and experienced before. And it's harder to realize like, oh, I've seen this before and this is how I could have done it better. And at the same time, I think older classmates have similar regrets, but on the other side. So I agree with Andrew with that. It's a personal decision.
Okay, I can go. Talking about the most meaningful experiences are really hard because there were so many. The things that were the most meaningful experiences for me, and then I'll elaborate on one, were being in the GSB show. Like Jenny said, it's the last, I was in the show that was the last like real live show, which hopefully we'll go back to that soon. Because it was like one of the most incredible, personally fulfilling experiences of my life. Doing, like Andrew said, doing my talk, I think was probably the most life-changing thing I've ever done. And I did Teach for America. So maybe besides Teach for America, my talk was like the shortest life-changing thing I've ever done, because it's 30 minutes. Diversity committee, which I know was meaningful to a lot of people, and being able to help implement real changes at the GSB around diversity programming was, I think it was the most like gratifying like part, because I felt like it was something I was giving rather than taking. Again, going back to that theme. And now I have, and touchy-feely. And you'll hear this a lot from a lot of GSB students in a class called Interpersonal Dynamics. And I feel like I feel like so equipped to deal with the world now, and to deal with really difficult situations and experiences in a way that I didn't necessarily before. And I feel like I have a very strong sense of who I am, for the good and for the bad, that nothing surprises me anymore. We just did 360 reviews at work, and I was like, yep, I've heard all this before, both the good and the bad. Like I'm so used to giving and receiving feedback, and feel super comfortable with it. I guess I talked about all of them, but it's hard to pinpoint one. And yeah, I tell everyone, I'm like, everyone do a talk. Like, it really is, when in your life are you going to have time to just sit down and reflect on who you are and what's made you you, and then have a whole group of people just listen to you and only be focused on you. It was like the only time in the GSB, phones were away, like people were laser focused on the person speaking. It was like a sacred, I'm not a religious person, but it was a sacred time at the GSB that was just so special, and to be a part of it. And now I have this video I get to keep forever and like show my kids. It's just so special.
I know we have limited time, Jessica, so I'll be short. Actually, my experiences, so they're related to each other. The timing thing, so as someone who was going back to the exact same thing I was doing, it's very easy to say that 2 years is either investment or potentially even, I'm making less than my peers who stayed at the firm did. But I think I am going back a different kind of leader. I was an Arbuckle Fellow, so tied to Sam's experience of touchy-feely, being able to take that early in my MBA 1 experience, and just really understand like how I am landing on other people. And it actually inspired me to really go back to Bain, because I know that when I go back, I can lead a team pretty early on, and I will lead it in a completely different way than I would have 2 years ago. And I have the Arbuckle Leadership Program to thank for that. And the last thing I'll make a plug for is me and a couple of classmates organized this workshop called Dream Big, Lead Boldly for Black college students looking to develop their careers, not even into business school. And doing that one with some of my best friends, who I think we will forever remember how we felt that day when we put on a virtual event in the height of COVID, but also acknowledging that it was because we came to Stanford and had this network and had all of these resources just thrown at us that we were able to have the kind of impact that we did. I think it served as like a really, really powerful reminder for me that my education isn't just for me, and it isn't just to develop my leadership and my career and my skills, all of which are true, but that this experience has given me a platform and has given me a privilege to really give back to people who may not have the same sorts of access or opportunities. So I just wanted to put a quick plug, even though that's not technically a Stanford experience, it definitely has defined a lot of the way that I've seen the GSB, and just know that so many of our classmates are going to go back to their communities and give back in the same way.
I love that. Thank you so much. So that is our program for today. Thank you to our attendees for spending a bit of your day with us, and a huge thank you to our panelists. Thank you so much for sharing your stories, sharing your experiences and your perspectives. I feel really grateful to have had this opportunity to hear about what your lives at the GSB and beyond have been like. So I want to again say thank you, and to everybody online, take care and have a great rest of your day. Thanks, everyone.